Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of Discussions with Rogers Employee Family Members. Today we are joined by Lin Morgan Chamberlain, niece of the late Joe Thompson. Mr. Thompson was the head engineer over at Rogers, creating things like Swivomatic and the Dynasonic frame system, but long before that, he was the inventor of such things as the flutophone and other plastic instruments, also the tenon joint expander and mouthpiece puller, which in one form or another is, to this day, a staple in every music instrument repair shop in the world. And Mr. Thompson has over 40 U.S. patents to his name, which is absolutely incredible. I thank you for joining me today, Lynn.
Thank you for asking me. This will be fun.
Of course,
Bring back
absolutely.
Lots of memories.
I hope so. So you spent some time in your youth living at the Thompson home. Is this correct?
Correct. My parents, we had a trailer that was up on the hill by the model shop. Now, you guys call that a different name. It was a big brick or block building, clear as the back as you come up the steps. And we moved there when I was 4 years old. And then my parents got a divorce, and so I ended up staying with Aunt Holly and Uncle Joe.
Very cool. And
followed him everywhere.
Around what years were you living there?
Okay, let me see here. I'm 70. So we started it when I lived there when I was 4. Do the math. I'm terrible. I'm an artist. I can't. And a musician.
Okay.
I can count, but I can't do it in my head.
I'm with you.
I lived there for about 6 years, maybe 5-6 years with them.
Okay. Very cool.
And I followed him everywhere he went. I was his shadow. He had a nickname for me. He called me Squirrely.
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 That's adorable.
Yes. I don't
So
know where he came up with that, but
how exactly are you related? What is the relation?
okay, Aunt Holly, which her name is Helen, but she preferred to be called Holly, is the sister to my dad.
Oh, okay.
And that's
Very
where
close
the red
relation.
hair came from. It was my dad's side. Aunt Holly had red hair too.
She did. Okay.
Yes.
So, what was Joe Thompson like to be around as an uncle? What kind of guy was he that you recall?
He was the sweetest, nicest man. He always made sure that I was involved. And when we would go to the plant, he made sure everybody knew I was with him. Of course, they knew because I was always his shadow. He was so generous with his time. And when I had a couple friends that lived down the road, and we used to take the great big drum boxes that had the big heads and things in them. They were huge. And at the shop, there was a big hill. And Uncle Joe showed us how to take those boxes apart and cover the hill, and then we get in another box and we ride down the hill. And he also helped us build houses out of those boxes, and we would go there and play all day with our Barbie dolls, and then they would stay all night, and he would come by and make sure we had cookies and milk, and he was just so sweet. And if you wanted to know something, he'd take the time to tell you. And
That's wonderful.
He was a very quiet man. But
yeah, I've heard he seems a bit mysterious from the information that's out there. People kind of refer to him as almost like a mad scientist who would like stay up late and sleep in and stay up late because he wanted to work when no one was around. Do you remember him being that kind of guy?
I don't know that he slept late. Usually, if I was staying there in the house, they had a hideaway bed that they pulled out that was in the living room, and that was my bed. When I would get up, he was already up, and for school and everything. So, but then he would work all day, and then he would come home, and then at night we'd have supper, and every night we had to sit in the living room and watch Johnny Carson. And then we all went to bed. So I don't remember him ever going late at night. He probably did, knowing him. He was kind of secretive.
Yeah. So was the house that you lived in on the same property as the plant was, correct?
Yes, we had a house trailer when my mother and dad were still together. But then when that all fell apart, they moved the trailer out, and then I stayed with Aunt Holly and Uncle Joe down in the house.
So what was it's walking distance? I mean, could you see the factory from the house?
Oh yeah, oh yes, it was right across. It was right across from us. We were close to the field, and the plant was straight across from there.
Amazing. So, your Uncle Joe and Biddy Eder owned a music store together. Do you have any memory of that store, or was that before your time?
That was basically before my time. Now, I had been in the store a couple times with Uncle Joe, but I really don't remember a lot about that.
Okay. Do you know where the store was? Where was it?
It was downtown. Let me think here a minute. I believe there was a bank on the corner, and it was maybe 2 or 3 buildings down from the bank, I think, if I remember right. I haven't been to Covington in years.
Is it right on that main drag in Covington?
Yes.
I don't know the name of the street, like where there's a subway now and...
Is there? I don't know. I've been trying to get to the Rogers jobby that you guys always do, the convention thingy, and it's not worked out. So I'm going to try this next one to get...
Maybe this year. We'd love to have you. We'd love to have you. Do you have any memories of the Rogers factory? Can you tell me what it was like in there? Or I've heard a legend of like animals roaming around and ducks and geese and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
what memories do you have of the plant?
Yeah, well, Uncle Joe always had a dog, and the dog followed us into the plant. And he always had ducks and geese. And the plant was just basically a big open cinder block building. And there was a big walkway down the middle, and on one side they were doing the heads, and we walked on back, and that's where they were putting the drums together. Aunt Holly worked there for a short period. And I remember names, but I don't remember faces. The Martins, and there was somebody else. I don't know. 4 or 5 years old, it was hard for me to know. They all knew me as Squirrely. They didn't know me as Linda or Lynn. So,
Squirrely's here.
Yeah.
But you remember seeing people putting drums together and stuff like that?
Yes, and watching them paint some of the drums, and that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
That's where my musical background came from, was Uncle Joe.
From being around Uncle Joe?
Yeah, he started teaching me music. He put me on the trumpet first, and then he switched me over to clarinet. So that's where all my background comes from. And I did not play those instruments for very long, because then I found out I could sing, and that was easy. So,
there you go. That way you are the instrument.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But we'd have a good time. We were in, as you go up the steps, there it looks like a big patio, which was the very top roof of their garage. They had all kinds of parties there, and in the wintertime we could ice skate on there.
Oh, wow.
But there's a building right there, and I cannot remember for the life of me what that was called. It's a brick building. And that's where he taught me music, was upstairs. And Aunt Holly used to put ukuleles together in that building.
Oh, right on.
Yeah, so that's where it all started.
Excellent. So
Go ahead.
I've heard the stories of, like, I don't know if it was ducks running around or geese.
Yes.
Were there all kinds of like animals, like a farm almost there, or?
Almost. They always had ducks. They had geese, and then they had roosters. And then Uncle Joe thought he would get into banny hens and banny roosters. Well, that got taken away because the banny roosters kept chasing me and flogging me, spurring me with the backs of my legs.
Oh no!
So they went away. But yes, there was always animals. He was quite the animal lover.
That's beautiful.
I remember he had a great big dog. His name was Major, and we called him Mage. And he went everywhere with us. And I don't know if you remember at Aunt Holly and Uncle Joe's, there's a let me think here. What was it? That was the greenhouse. He had built a place for the dogs to go in and sleep at night.
Oh.
And one time, I remember one of the big semis hit Mage and killed him.
Oh no.
And he was absolutely a huge dog. And here comes little skinny Uncle Joe coming up the hill with tears in his eyes, carrying Major upstairs, up to the top of the hill.
That's
but
a terrible
he always had animals. There were feeding raccoons and birds, and everywhere you looked, there were animals, which probably is the reason why I'm such an animal lover.
Probably.
Yeah.
Seems like such a peaceful guy in that way.
Yes, he was. He really was.
Did you ever have any or remember any interactions with anyone like Henry Grossman or Ben Strauss or anyone like that being around?
Yes, I was around them a few times. They came to the house, and Aunt Holly always, they always had cocktails, and sometimes she would fix dinner for them. But Henry Grossman seemed very nice. Ben Strauss, I wasn't around a whole lot, so I really can't say.
Mm-hmm.
Henry Grossman was there quite often.
He was there more often?
Yeah, well, that I knew of, yes.
Right. So what other employees do you remember being around? Do you have any recollection of like anyone like Marvin Thompson or Jerry Shields or anything like that?
Jerry Shields, I remember that name.
Yeah.
There were quite a few, and I can see them in my memory, but I can't tell you their names. And
Right.
to this day, I'm terrible with names. I remember faces, but not names.
But you had remember the Martins earlier. There was Don Martin.
Yes,
and
I remember that couple.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just a wonderland for me, and
Right.
he almost made sure I was always around when he was talking to people, and and when when he would teach me music and I would start to play something, and if I made a mistake, his big thing was always, "Now, damn it, Squirrely, that wasn't written like that. Play it the right way."
So what was his main instrument? What did he play?
Clarinet.
Clarinet.
Yes. He could play anything he picked up. I mean, anything. But I always remember him playing the clarinet. He was in several bands, and he passed away before he ever got to hear me sing, and he would have been tickled to death. I sang with a 14-piece big band, and he would have loved it, but they were both gone by that time.
Oh, he would have loved it.
Oh, yeah. He never heard me sing. Now, Aunt Holly did, but he never did.
That's a shame.
So, yeah.
Were you ever in Joe's mythical workshop? If so, what was it?
Oh,
what
yeah.
was it like
Oh,
in
yeah.
there?
It was just a big building and instruments and stuff piled everywhere. He never seemed like he was so organized because everything was always stacked up. But
Right.
you ask him for something and he'd go right to it.
He knew where it was.
He knew where it was at. Yes.
So
yes.
were there like plastic instruments and mouthpiece pullers everywhere? I picture it like creations being worked on and like there. Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
There's one of them.
This was one of his humazoos
That's right.
that he invented, and I had three other pieces, but we couldn't find them. I got
So in that workshop, were there pieces like that just
everywhere.
laying around? And
Yeah, everywhere.
That's
And
how I picture it.
Clay and metal, and I would sit and read. There down on the other side of the field, there was a junkie. They called the junkie, which had all this secondhand stuff. And when he would go over there looking for things, for old instruments and things, he would always come back. He'd always bring me a book.
Oh wow.
And so I've got a lot of books that Uncle Joe gave me, and the hurricane took some of them.
It's unfortunate.
Got in the middle of that mess.
I'm sorry to hear that.
When he was working, he'd hand me a book, and he'd say, "Here, Squirrely, read this." And sometimes he would write in them for me, and he was my idol.
That's wonderful. So people I talk to who worked at the factory always talk about this hill. I guess it was behind the factory or something, where they would take old wraps or old parts they weren't going to use and they would throw them down the hill.
Yes, yes.
Do you know
I
where that
remember
hill was?
It was a mess. I was not allowed to go back there for fear I'd get hurt. But yeah,
Right.
we were back there. I spent a lot of time behind the factory in the woods.
Right.
All of us kids would play in the woods, and he'd come back and make sure we were all right. And yeah, I remember that mess.
You do. There was just piles
Yes.
of stuff. People
Everywhere.
are still people are still finding stuff back there.
Are you
I know,
kidding?
Brian Kendall goes
Yes.
back there every once in a while, and he finds little pieces of Joe Thompson's plastic instruments, or he found a big piece of the plastic that they mold the instruments out of, and
Wow.
little trumpet slides and things like
Yes.
that. There's a lot of stuff
I
still
had
back
one
there.
Of those too. Yeah. So, how did he get up there and get into there without that old guy coming out and?
He got permission from the owner of the land now.
Oh, did
He got permission. I think the guy gave him the key code to the lock, and he lets him back there once in a while, and
Oh, wow.
he goes and looks, and he found a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Last time I was there, oh gosh, it's probably been 15, 20 years ago. I'm an artist, and I had a show in Dayton, and we were coming back to Fort Wayne where we lived, and so my girlfriend and I went in there and drove up, and it just made me so sad.
Yeah, brought back a lot of memories, I'm sure. Yeah,
Yep.
that's tough. So do you remember the fire at the factory in February of '67?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. That was another.
Can you
sad
talk about
day.
that? What do you remember?
Well, of course, Uncle Joe was over there and trying to, tell everybody, watch out, get out, and our trailer was right there across from it. And so I just remember standing and watching the fire, and then the fire trucks finally came. And he was very, very, very sad. I mean, and so was Aunt Holly. She was up there too. He had to make sure all the animals were out.
Yeah.
Because sometimes they would sleep in the factory.
Really? Mm-hmm. Oh, that's amazing.
He had an office there, a small office, and a lot of times you'd find one of his dogs there.
His office was in the factory.
Yes, one of his offices. Yes.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So how many buildings were on that property? There was his house, there was his workshop, which was separate from the house and the factory,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And then also the factory. So there were 3 buildings?
Well, no, wait a minute. There was a garage, a 2-car garage. He built the house and the garage, and he also built the cinder block building that was clear in the back, and then the brick building. He built all that, drew the plans up, and he built everything himself.
I've heard that. I heard that he also partially built the factory himself.
Yes,
Is that
he
true?
did. Yes, he did. Yeah.
It's
From what I
amazing.
remember, he was just an amazing individual.
I was going to say, this guy seems absolutely incredible. I mean,
Yeah. And so humble.
I'm sure.
That was another thing that you could always be sure of. He was so humble. But if he had a point, he could get that point across.
He could be aggressive when he wanted to, right?
Yes. But for the most part, he was very sweet and humble. And like I keep saying it, he was my idol. He was just... That's all I can say. I loved him with all my heart and was so sad when he died.
I know.
And here it is, this many years, and it still makes me sad.
It's still on the surface. I know. I could see it. I could feel your pain, honestly. I'm sure you were very young, but when CBS purchased Rogers, do you recall your Uncle Joe feeling any kind of way about it or speaking about it? I know that was probably pretty hard on him.
Yeah, it was hard on him because everything just went downhill after it went to CBS. But he knew it was time for him to retire, although he never did retire.
Right.
But yeah, it was sad for him. He was.
Yeah.
That was his life.
I was going to
That
say,
was his total life.
all of seeing like all of his creations and inventions go to this big corporation, that had to be hurtful.
Yeah, it was, and of course his name's on it, but he doesn't get
Right.
He didn't get residuals for it.
Right. And I mean, I've heard a lot of the people who knew him claim that he died of a broken heart, and
That could be right. Yeah. He was supposed to come home the next morning, and from the hospital, and Aunt Holly went home to get clean clothes for him, and then he had a heart attack again and didn't make it.
Yeah.
So.
How old was he at the time? Do you remember?
Gosh, no, I don't. He wasn't very old. I want to say maybe late 50s, early 60s.
Oh.
I may be wrong.
Far too young either way.
Yes,
Far too
yes,
young.
Yeah. He died in 69, 68, 69, something like that. The plant had already been sold.
Yeah.
And everything was moved out, and then shortly afterwards he had a heart attack.
Right. They were moving everything from Covington to Dayton, correct?
Yes.
Right. It's been said that it's the worst kept secret in Covington that Joe Thompson was actually a partner and part owner of Rogers. Is there any truth to that you know
Yes,
of?
there is. Yes, there is. He was a secret owner. He was half owner. And
Half? Really?
Yeah. A lot of people didn't know that, and whenever
I don't think anybody knew that at the time.
No.
I don't think anyone.
No, it was not to be published. He didn't want any credit for any of it. But yes.
So you think it was a stipulation that he didn't want it that way. He wanted it to be Henry Grossman is the owner, he was a silent owner.
Yes.
Yeah.
I believe so. Yeah. And and I tell people that and they go, "What?" They don't, and I said, "Yeah, he was very secretive about it." But yes, he was part owner.
Wow.
And it was so interesting. He would put all the money away that he would make, and then when he passed away, Aunt Holly used to go to the junkie to buy clothes, and she would buy nothing. She would buy nothing unless it was on sale. She scrimped and pinched, and when the lawyer read the will, she burst out laughing. Oh no, that can't be right. Are you sure you're talking about Josephus Brown Thompson? It was yeah, she was like so shocked, and then she got angry. But she got over
Well, I guess he had put all the money away?
Yeah, well, she was angry because, she scrimped and everything, and she didn't have to. But
Right.
yeah, she got over that too.
Do any stories come to mind concerning being around your uncle or being at the Rogers plant? Any other stories before we wrap up?
The only stories that I can tell you about was when he would help us build our forts out of those boxes. And like I said, he would come out late at night with a lantern and make sure we were all right. And he was always so fun. He'd climb in with us. So you go, "Well, this is nice. He'd go.
You did a good job.
Then he said, "If you girls get scared, come down to the house." So yeah, that was my main thing that I remember. That and building the slide on the hill right beside where the big trucks pulled in.
Right.
And that was always so fun.
So this kind of stuff would be going on while the employees were inside building drums and putting all that together?
Yes.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. He always took time for me. He always took time for me.
Mm-hmm.
The other kids, they were just there, but it was always me.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was so cool. He would, like I started to tell you beginning, he had an ashtray that sat on the kitchen table, and then he would walk down, and there was a coffee cup for his coffee.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, that's his cup?
Yes, that's his cup and saucer, and I have the ashtray, but it's in storage somewhere because of the hurricane.
Right.
And he would come mid-morning, go to the stove, and Holly always had coffee for him. He'd have a cup of coffee, and then he would have lunch, and then mid-afternoon he would come in and get the coffee cup, go sit down at his end of the table. No one could sit there. Aunt Holly would never let anybody sit there. And he would have cookies and coffee, and then he would go back to the factory, and then we had dinner about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the evening. But that was his routine every single day. I mean, he was even in the plant on Sunday doing things.
He was a 7-day-a-week guy, huh?
Yes, yeah. And drawing up plans for different things like the lug nuts, the foot pedals, the Dynasonic drum.
Of course.
Yeah, and that was really interesting because he had no education except high school.
Wow.
And it all came from here.
Yeah. It's many people have claimed that he was a genius.
Yes.
Many people.
And he and my Aunt Holly met. She had just gotten a divorce, and he had gotten a divorce. And I don't remember if Aunt Holly was coming out of the courthouse and he was coming up the steps, or it was the other way. But that's how they met. They met on the steps of the courthouse.
Wow.
Yeah, and
they were both from Covington?
Aunt Holly was from Troy.
Okay,
Troy,
very
Ohio,
close by.
Where she was born.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just interesting because she always said it was love at first sight.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, we sent you some pictures of him when he was. Yep. And I think my husband also sent you a younger picture of Aunt Holly too.
Yes. Yep.
So they were just wonderful. I could probably tell you every single detail of that house from memory. There was one bathroom, and then downstairs he had made another big room. And finally, in latter years, Aunt Holly used it as a living room. It was a big, huge room. It had a bedroom on one side and a bathroom down on the other end. And it had a baby grand piano in the back corner. Mm-hmm. And Aunt Holly used it for storage. But then after a while, she finally started using it to live in because it was on the main floor, more or less.
Yeah. Yeah, one in a box there. Very nice. Absolutely. Yes. Do you ever recall him going to the offices in Cleveland or anything like that, or did he mostly just stick around Covington?
He mostly stuck around Covington, but I do remember him going to Cleveland. I never really understood a whole lot about it, but he was gone. He went to Cleveland. Or he went, at the end there, he was going to Dayton once in a while.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming it was to try to get him to do it correctly.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But
well,
it's
things.
Go ahead.
Things kind of fell apart without him.
Yes, they did.
There were some employees who were still trying to hold it together, but
it was just so
as
sad.
soon as he was gone, Rogers started to slowly go downhill.
Yeah.
And then by the time they got to California,
yeah, it was really bad when they got to California.
It started to get really bad. Yeah.
Yeah, he was Mr. Rogers. That's all there was to it.
For sure. For sure.
He was just everything. He treated his employees wonderful. He was always, now there would be a couple times I could hear him raise his voice, but I understood why.
Sure.
There were some mistakes that were going on that he didn't want, but he corrected them, and he didn't.
Right.
He didn't get loud and nasty. But yeah,
I wonder if the employees knew that he was a part owner. Do you think they knew?
I don't think so. A lot of people didn't know it. Yeah, a lot of people didn't know it. And whenever I would say something about it, what do you mean he was part owner? I said, well, it was a secret.
Right. Right.
Aunt Holly would have picnics for the people in the plant. That top roof of the garage was a great big patio, and she would lay a spread out for them, and they would all come around and talk and have cocktails, and she'd bring food out, and everybody was there, and I was always right in the middle of it, always in the middle.
That's wonderful. That's great.
And I had talked to a couple people online, and they remember a little girl following Aunt Holly around, or Uncle Joe, I mean.
As you.
Yeah, and then when I said squirrely, they were, oh yeah, now I remember who you are. I don't know where he came up with squirrely, but he did.
That's great. Well, you were around a legendary man, and I greatly appreciate you helping me document and preserve your Uncle Joe's legacy.
Yes.
And, because I'm all about just the preservation and keeping his name in the forefront, just so that future generations can learn about him and learn about how important the things he did for not only Rogers Drums, but for a lot of things. Just for them to know how important it was.
I totally appreciate this more than you will ever know.
I appreciate you doing it.
If we have a gig and we're out somewhere, or if we don't have a gig and we go listen to some bands, first thing I look at is see if their drums are Rogers, and I usually, if
of course
they're not,
you do.
when they're not, I usually go up and I say, that's too bad you don't have a Rogers drum set. Oh, I'd love to have one of those. And then, well, how do you know Rogers? And then I tell them, go, really? But my husband and I both always look at the drums. So I keep looking here and there to somewhere where we could afford to buy one.
Yeah, the prices get crazy sometimes, for sure.
Yes, but they're worth it. They're worth it.
They are. They're the best drums ever made. The era where your Uncle Joe was involved, in my opinion, are the best drums ever made, for sure.
I totally agree. The drum paper that they use, the sparkle, they used to give me pieces of that, and I would cut dolls and shapes and things out and do collages. I just remembered that. I looked up behind you, and there's a red sparkle on the shelf.
Yeah.
And that was my favorite, was the red.
That's my favorite as well.
Yes. And there would be scraps after they covered the shells, and I'd go in and get the scraps and take it home down, and Holly'd get upset because it would leave glitter all over the floor, but she got over it.
That's great. Well, Lynn, this has been absolutely wonderful. I can't thank you enough for being part of this and being willing to do this and taking your time to just talk to me for a little bit about your Uncle Joe. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much for asking me, and
of course,
maybe I'll be able to make it this year.
That'd be great. We'd love to have you at the Shields Classic Drum Show in April. That'd be wonderful.
Cool. Yeah, I had talked to Jerry. You reminded me. I had talked to Jerry a couple times on the phone, and he had remembered me, and we had some good talks. And Rob Cook, that did the second edition Rogers book. Yes. He found him, and then he called me, and he sent me one of these books. So I've got that book. Oh, awesome. But yeah, Jerry was another nice man. Jerry was great, and Rob Cook is also a wonderful guy. Yeah, no, I've never met him in person, but great guys. So, well, Lynn, I thank you so much for doing this. If you'll stick around for a second, when I stop recording, I'm just we'll wrap up here, and then we'll talk for a second off. Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much, Lynn. I appreciate you. Thank you. A huge thank you to Lynn for being so generous with her time and sharing her memories. I hope she enjoyed our talk as much as I did. Again, if you noticed my shirt, it's just a reminder to check out Hawthorne Drum Shop out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania for all your drum and hardware needs. It's one of the best shops around with a very knowledgeable staff and huge inventory stock. None of these shops that I mention in these videos pay me to do so or even ask me to do so. I simply enjoy endorsing quality shops that I believe in because quality drum shops are sometimes hard to come by. Thanks so much for watching.